There's a real Irish pub sitting underneath Air Force One at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. And in the summer of 1984, Ronald Reagan walked through its doors, raised a pint of Smithwick's ale, and became part of its history. In June 1984, President Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan traveled to Ireland. But one stop on that trip was deeply personal. His great grandfather, Michael Reagan, had come from this area before emigrating to America in the 1800s. Streets were decorated, residents gathered to welcome their American visitors, and this little Irish community suddenly found itself at the center of international attention. For President Reagan, however, this wasn't another diplomatic stop. This was a chance to stand in the place where part of his family's American history had begun. And naturally, there was also a stop at the local pub. The pub belonged to John and Mary O'Farrell. And in anticipation of the Reagans' visit, O'Farrell's became associated with a new name, the Ronald Reagan Pub. And for a few minutes, the President of the United States wasn't standing behind a podium or sitting across the table from another world leader. To me, that's what makes this story so interesting. It connects the presidency with something much more personal: family, ancestry, and that very human desire to understand where we came from. The pub continued operating in Ballyporeen for another 20 years, but in 2004 it closed. And that might have been the end of the story, except for a man named Frederick Ryan Jr. During a trip to Ireland, Ryan visited Ballyporeen and discovered that the pub had closed. He contacted John and Mary O'Farrell, and eventually an agreement was reached to acquire much of the historic pub and preserve it at the Reagan Library. Now imagine what came next: the bar, the stools, the fixtures, the signs, the memorabilia. Much of the interior that had surrounded President and